Week 7 is in the books, and so we are here with another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellows podcast, bringing you 10 trending and ending players this time. We are without our fearless leader, Lucas Wenzel, but I am joined by my friend, my co-host today, Mr. Tyler Plath. Tyler, give me 2 words today to just explain how you felt from week 7 so far.
2 words? LOL what? I like this week had a little bit of everything and in the worst way possible. I mean, like we had upsets, we had like upsets doesn't even like begin to describe half of it. Like everything that you thought was normal got flipped on its head this week. And that's all that I can think of is just LOL what? Like that's all. That's how this week really went.
Exactly. I can't say much more than that. That's exactly how I felt as well. Like I said, we are talking trending and ending players today. Make sure you subscribe to the pod, whether you're on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're getting this podcast from. Hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, leave us a nice little review, drop a comment, whatever you want to do. But Tyler, let's not waste any more time today, and let's jump right into our 10 trending and ending players. I'm going to start us off today because I finally found some relief this season. Mr. Jahmyr Gibbs finally did it. He finally had the week I've been waiting for. 27.6 fantasy points. This was a guy I think I hyped up nonstop all offseason. I've been fully on the bandwagon, fully invested in Jahmyr Gibbs. Like I said, 27.6 fantasy points. He had 11 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown. But the part that gets us really excited, 9 receptions on 10 targets for 58 yards, had 15 points coming from the passing game in PPR formats. But obviously, we do need to talk about this. When Jahmyr Gibbs, I got to pump the brakes a little bit, right? This isn't exactly a perfect breakout game because there was no David Montgomery in this game. And a large percentage of these points did come in garbage time because pretty much the entire the last 3 quarters were garbage time in this game because the Ravens just got up so quickly and dominated the Lions. But like I said, 9 receptions on 10 targets. He had a 19% target share in this one. And the Lions were finally starting to move him around a little bit, use him in different areas. Tyler, I do got to ask, because I don't want to let my optimism get in the way. And I know you're more of our Monty guy on the pod. Is this something, maybe not to the same level, but is this something that he can maintain when David Montgomery returns?
I don't think so, unfortunately. I think the hope when Monty was healthy was he's going to get receiving work. And when Monty has been back, there has not been receiving work. Now, you hope that after this game and potentially after next week, let's say Monty misses next week too, and Jahmyr Gibbs capitalizes again, you hope then that he has kind of carved out a role for himself in the receiving game. But that's a major, major question mark. And especially when we have now realized at this point this year, when there are 2 running backs in that Lions backfield that are very relevant players, it's not exactly the player, it's the role that is just not as profitable or as big as we thought it would be. So you hope for another good game next week if Monty is out, and that way Gibbs will see more of the field moving forward. But he's not so much a buy candidate for me as he is a sell candidate. And I understand not selling him. I wouldn't, but if you have to lean one way or the other, I lean sell over buy.
I would agree with that. I wouldn't be buying Gibbs at this point. I think you've kind of missed that. It does look good. His last 2 games with Montgomery, he saw 9 and 5 targets. So he at least had somewhat of a role. Obviously 9 and 5, gives you some big variance on the points that he's going to score, but he does see Vegas this next week. And he does have he has a nice playoff schedule. I'll say he gets Chicago, Denver, Vikings. Or no, I lied. He gets Chicago the week before the playoffs, and he goes Denver, Vikings, and then Dallas. And I think Dallas could be beneficial just because I don't think they're going to necessarily be able to manhandle that Dallas defensive line and just run Monty 32 times up the middle on him. And so I think Gibbs could be more involved in that. But obviously, that's a little farther down the road. And like you said, Vegas is a good matchup if Monty were to miss for him to really establish himself before this upcoming bye week. But I would agree again just with what you said about I'm not buying Gibbs here, right? This is probably the ceiling of what we're going to see this year for Gibbs. I've kind of accepted that. I think he's still a fantasy valuable fantasy asset.
That's a tongue twister
on your team, but he's not going to be a top 5 running back, and he's not going to see these numbers week in and week out. Tyler, you then went with an entire group. You kind of cheated here. You didn't just give us one player. You're giving us multiple. So why don't you dive on into the Steelers wide receivers?
It's George Pickens and Deontay Johnson are the two guys that I'm going to touch on here. And it was going to be just Deontay Johnson. And then I realized oh wait, this is also a good thing for George Pickens. And I was the George Pickens guy on this podcast. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'll take a little bit of victory lap, and I'll pat myself on the back for all my George Pickens shares. But like I said, Deontay Johnson is now back in the mix after he returned from the IR, and he did only play 66% of team snaps, but those came on passing situations, not so much in the run situations. And PFF had some stats out there. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but Deontay Johnson, again, was in the game on passing situations, and he got targets. If I'm not mistaken, he had 5 catches, 74 yards, something like that, 79 yards.
Yep, 5 catches, 79 yards, and 6 targets.
That is a great first outing coming back from the IR on limited snaps. The most encouraging thing for me, though, is that both Pickens and Deontay had a target on at least 25% of their routes. That's great. That's just great. And on top of that, they both had a 26% or higher target share in this game. So not only are they hyper-focused in the passing game, but they're getting rewarded for their routes. They are they participate a ton in their passing game just based on their routes. They have the targets to stay productive. They can coexist with each other. Mm-hmm. It's been repeated a couple times on multiple broadcasts now. Kenny Pickett, when he sees George Pickens in one-on-one coverage, he's going George Pickens' way. And that's happened multiple times in each game, right? So you typically will find that in more man coverage. Sometimes you find that in zone coverage. But if that's more in man coverage, guess who then gets the feast in zone coverage? Mm-hmm. Deontay Johnson. And Pat Freiermuth unfortunately hit IR again because he reactivated his hamstring injury.
Yes.
So who else are they going to throw the ball to? I mean, it really is the George Pickens, Deontay Johnson show. And mm-hmm. you may look at that and go, they're going to eat into each other's work. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it really is just one guy may do well in a certain matchup than the other guy, but both are going to be fantasy relevant. Both are going to get targets and volume because, again, there's really only 2 options in the passing game, and it is those 2 guys. So I'm a big fan of Steelers wide receivers moving forward. I was all in on George Pickens. You were all in on Deontay Johnson. He was one of your flag plants. So this is I have to think that this is a great feeling for you knowing that he's now back.
Yeah, I had said that George Pickens before this week was a sell high, and that was also before Pat Freiermuth was placed on IR, and I do think that makes a big difference, right? Freiermuth is a tight end who can get close to that 15 to 20% target rate or target share, and when you just take that away, all of a sudden, like you said, there's nowhere else for this ball to go. And these guys for sure can coexist. They play in different parts of the field. They're very different wide receivers. Deontay Johnson's going to be a route technician, and George Pickens is going to be the guy who is, attacking the ball at the point of attack and going up and making the spectacular plays. I will say, I think rest of the season, I think George Pickens definitely has a higher ceiling week to week. Just because we've seen it, he can break those, big touchdowns on a given week. But I also think that lowers his floor. Whereas I think Deontay Johnson is going to be he's going to get you 12 to 16 fantasy points every single week. And I don't think that's going to vary too much. But like you said, this was good to see. And the Rams have a sneaky good pass defense. And so for them to be able to perform like this, especially Deontay Johnson, like you said, only playing 66% of snaps, that is really big to see moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, in week 7, Pickens had an ADOT of almost 15 yards. Deontay's ADOT was 10 yards.
Yeah.
Like you said, they operate in 2 different parts of the field, and it kind of sets them both up for success. Again, the ball has to go somewhere through the air, and I don't necessarily think Allen Robinson or Calvin Austin are going to be that much of competition to both George Pickens and Deontay Johnson to steal targets away and stuff like that. So yeah, big fans of Steelers wide receivers moving forward.
For sure. The next guy we're going to talk about is also a wide receiver, is Mr. Jakobi Meyers, who just dropped 18.1 fantasy points this last week. He's had 3 top 15 finishes in a row, 20 fantasy points, 17 and 18, wide receiver 10, 14 and 10 in PPR. He's had 7+ targets in all but one game and has had double-digit targets in 4 out of 6 in his last 3 games. He's had 19 receptions on 30 targets for 186 yards and 3 touchdowns. His counterpart, Davante Adams, has had no touchdowns. He has only seen 130 receiving yards, the lowest 3-game stretch for Davante Adams since 2017. So the question then is for Jakobi Meyers, is he legit, or is he just kind of feasting off the fact that the Raiders don't have a consistent quarterback right now? With Jimmy G getting hurt, they have Brian Hoyer coming in, Aiden O'Connell for a game, although Jakobi struggled with O'Connell in that Chargers game. And for me, I think Jakobi Meyers has a legitimate role in this offense. He is going to be the big beneficiary of the fact that Davante Adams is going to be doubled more times than not on every given week. He is a guy who does get open. He's a PPR machine. We saw that when he did get snaps in New England last year. And I think that's what you need on the opposite side of Davante Adams, right? He's not going to be the speed guy where you're just relying on these big plays, but he's going to get consistent work. He's going to get consistent targets. I do think Davante Adams is going to bounce back. I don't think Davante Adams is finished by any means, but he showed in the game where Davante Adams had 20 targets that he can still put up 12 targets himself, right? So even when Davante Adams feasts, I think Jakobi Meyers can feast as well. And so because of that, I don't see Jakobi Meyers as a sell high right now, just because I don't think for name value wise, you're going to get enough of a return for Jakobi Meyers. And I do think he has a solidified role where he can maybe not maintain top 15 finishes every week, but at least maintain good offensive output. Tyler, do you think Jakobi Meyers is legit rest of the season?
I am led to believe that. I'm looking up, just his target share numbers, and I'm kind of stunned at the amount of targets that this guy is getting. Like he has 4 games with at least 10 targets, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. And
looking at his target share numbers, he's just outside the top 15. He's like, he's top 20. He's top 20 in target share. Like, I don't understand how the Raiders are able to have Davante Adams and Jakobi Meyers, who are both top 20 in target share, while having Josh Jacobs, who himself is getting like 17, 20 carries a game. And I know this past week he had 11, but that's also because they were just playing from behind.
Yeah.
And Josh Jacobs, then, if I'm not mistaken, he's getting like 5 or 6 targets a game too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where all of these opportunities are coming from in this Raiders offense.
It's because there's no one else.
It's no one else. But like you said, you brought up the point that like you're not going to get the right value on Jakobi Meyers because everyone's going to be like, oh, Davante Adams, it's Jakobi Meyers, right? You're just going to have to write out Jakobi Meyers. You may be able to package him, or you find someone that is that has paid attention and sees that, wow, Jakobi Meyers has finished as a wide receiver 10, 14 and 10 in 3 straight weeks. Well, I want that on my team, right? Like, if you can capitalize, do it, but don't sell for really anything less than a full dollar's worth of value, because Jakobi Meyers is producing like a wide receiver is producing like a guy that we would expect like Ja'Marr Chase to have produced like at the beginning of the season, stuff like that. Like, yeah, I don't know if you can necessarily move off of Jakobi Meyers at this point.
Yeah, and Josh McDaniels, I think his Achilles heel is the fact that he relies so much on players that he's, coached in the past. And obviously that bodes very well for Jakobi Meyers if he's going to have that defined role moving forward. Speaking of someone who's finding their defined role this season, Mr. Jonathan Taylor has been interesting since he's returned. I think he's made some people question. He's made some people excited. Tyler, what are your thoughts on Jonathan Taylor?
I think that Jonathan Taylor is finally back. I think that Jonathan Taylor is finally here to stay. Him and Zach Moss are still splitting snaps and rushing attempts. But JT has seen more and more routes since his debut. JT, his route participation was 14% in his first game back, then up to 37%, then up to 48% this past week. And Zach Moss has gone from 64% to 40% to 32%. So we're seeing the role in the passing game come over to JT. So that means that there's a receiving floor for JT, and JT's getting all the attempts inside the 5. Mm-hmm. So he's getting the goal line value. So Zach Moss is still in consideration most weeks just because he's still splitting snaps and rushing attempts. So he's still getting enough volume to be in flex consideration. And not that we didn't know this already, but I like the stats are proving that the running back to have in this Colts backfield is Jonathan Taylor. Like you knew that based on the name, but now the stats are backing it up. So I like I said, Jonathan Taylor, I think is here to stay now. And, I think the time to buy low has officially passed. And I don't know if you were ever able to buy low on Jonathan Taylor just because of his name, but Jonathan Taylor is back, and that is very, very exciting because in a very depleted running back, what do we want to call it? Market
landscape. Yeah.
Landscape. It's nice to have a reemergence like this with Jonathan Taylor.
It definitely is. And I like what you brought up about Zach Moss too. They both saw 18 carries this week. That's great volume. And I don't know how much more volume they're going to continue to give Jonathan Taylor over Zach Moss from a rushing aspect. And they're playing the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have been one of the top 5 defenses against the run this week. And they ran the ball 36 times between the two guys. So even if Zach Moss, is dropping down to 12, 13 carries a game, that's still plenty enough in some leagues to be considering him as flex start most weeks, especially if he's still seeing receiving work, right?
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor's taking over the receiving work. Jonathan Taylor is establishing himself, and I think the gap might widen even more as the year goes on. But I don't think it's going to widen enough to truly take Zach Moss out of a fantasy relevant role.
I mean, it would not surprise me moving forward if we see Jonathan Taylor get 15 or more carries a game, 3 or 4 targets a game, and Zach Moss gets 12 carries and 3 or 4 targets a game. Like, you can't necessarily say that Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor are in the exact same role, but they kind of are. And Jonathan Taylor just has the extra pieces of the goal line work and more routes, giving him more opportunity to have a bigger receiving game. But both these guys are still going to be steady pieces in your lineup.
Yeah, and we're going to keep it on the same team with Mr. Josh Downs. And I'll admit, I thought that he was a sit last week. And honestly, looking at it, if I came into that, with the same defensive that Cleveland has been performing as, with a rookie wide receiver, with a backup quarterback coming into it, I would say sit 10 out of 10 times. But Josh Downs broke a big play. He had another 30-yard catch in the game, 5 catches, 125 yards. What was he? Wide receiver 3 on the week so far with 23.5 fantasy points. And Tyler, Josh Downs looks like an every week starter with Gardner Minshew. These are his stats over the 3 full games of Gardner Minshew. 8.6 targets a game, 6 receptions, 67 yards, 0.6 touchdowns, and 16.3 fantasy points with Gardner Minshew so far. He's had a game with 12 targets. He's had a game with 8 targets. Now this one he only had 6. But like I said, the Browns defense is good. And I know the Colts scored a lot of points. A lot of that had to do with Deshaun Watson turning the ball over a ton, having PJ Walker play. But the fact of the matter is, Gardner Minshew is finding both him and Pittman all over the field. And I don't think this Colts defense is good enough where they're going to stop many teams. They're going to be in games where they have to move the ball, where they have to put up points to stay in it. And that's only going to bode well for Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. I think Michael Pittman could have easily been swapped in with this. And I really think it just comes down to the fact that Gardner Minshew is playing really good, right? And that's why we're talking about JT, Zach Moss. That's why we're talking about Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. Like, Gardner Minshew has stepped in and shown, hey, I can still run this team. I can still keep it fantasy relevant. And Josh Downs is playing about 75% of snaps. He's been consistently right around that range over the last couple weeks. And so, yeah, I personally think Josh Downs moving forward is an every week flex consideration. I don't know if you feel differently though, Ty.
I think he is too. I mean, since week 3, he's the wide receiver 13 with the wide receiver 18 in fantasy points per game. Like, those numbers tell me it's not even flex. It's low end wide receiver 2 conversation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see if we come back down to earth a little bit with both Josh Downs and Michael Pittman in this passing game in general, I guess. I mean, their next opponents, New Orleans, Carolina, who have been pretty good against the pass. Then you've got New England, and New England is really just a coin flip, honestly.
That's true.
Then they got to bye, and then they go Tampa, Tennessee. Tampa, coin flip again. Tennessee has been a little bit better since the beginning of the season, but still Tennessee. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Vegas, and Houston. So we'll see if they come back down to earth. But for the time being, I mean, Josh Downs is, I mean, we talked about them both in our waiver post. You posted the minute video. I posted the longer YouTube video on it. But the fact that he's still available in under 50% of leagues is mind blowing. Oh. Like, and again, we're talking about a guy that is not just a rotational piece on a bye week or an injury or something. Like, this is a guy that should be put into your lineup moving forward until further notice.
Let me ask you a couple guys, and I want you to tell me if you drop them to pick up, what's his name? Josh Downs. Tutu Atwell.
Yes.
Let's see. Romeo Doubs.
Yes.
Let me see. I'm trying to. Should have had this a little
name game is hard to do on the fly.
It is hard to do on the fly. Maybe you're not dropping this guy, but would you rather have him or Jerry Jeudy?
Honestly, Josh Downs. Honestly,
Jahan Dotson.
Oh, our that hurts. That's Josh Downs still though.
Would you rather have Josh Downs right now? This is the last one we'll do. Yeah, you're not dropping this guy. Would you rather have Josh Downs or DeAndre Hopkins?
Oh.
Remember, Tannehill's probably out for a couple weeks.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Probably. Oh man.
I feel like I don't know if there's a right answer to this one.
There really isn't, but based on just, I mean, recency bias would tell you Josh Downs.
Yeah. I mean, that is a gross question. Are we going to go, a guy who's crazy talented in an awful situation, or a guy who's up and coming in a much better situation, and so. Alrighty, well, that wraps up our trending players. So we're going to take a quick break to hear from our friends over at Underdog before we wrap up the episode with our ending players.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
And we're back. And since we just heard from our friends at Underdog, I know it's not the episode for it. I know it's coming next episode, the Fellas Full Fade. But Ty, we got to bring it up. Fellas are 2 for 2.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I was the curse. I had struggled
Well,
in our fellas full fade. I think I was 0 for 4, 0 for 5. And I came back and we hit easily. Well, I guess Mark
Easily.
Andrews' yardage was closer, but he did have a fantastic day. He was only 6 yards over. But a hit is a hit. And we were dead right about both those two guys having great games in their matchups, and they did. So you need to make sure you tune in all the way to the end of the next episode because we're about to go 3 for 3. We're giving you guys free.
jeez.
We are cashing right now. We are on fire in Fuego.
Would you on Fuego?
On Fuego right now. That is how hot we are. We are on Fuego. Okay. Tyler, I had the extra ending player. So you are the extra trending player. So you have the extra ending player. So you're going to start us off right now. Who is your first ending player?
Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. Not going to say that we were right about him being a massive sell high after week 2, but we were right. We were right. Since that running back 4 performance in week 2, Brian Robinson hasn't seen 15 or more carries in a game, and the most that he's seen is 14. He's averaging 10 fantasy points a game, which puts him square at running back 31 in points per game. He's averaging 11 combined touches per game, which is a huge, huge drop from what we saw the first 2 weeks. His saving grace is that running backs have been terrible this year. And we mentioned it earlier with Jonathan Taylor, but he's finished inside the top 30 every week since week 2. But don't let those finishes fool you, because you need to sell him at whatever price you can get. If there are people that still believe in the upside of Brian Robinson, ship him off to that person, because again, 11 combined touches per game and you're only averaging 10 fantasy points a game. If someone believes that there's still upside with Brian Robinson, get him out. The good days are done with Brian Robinson. This offense, is struggling. It is still trying to protect Sam Howell because he's still getting sacked at just an above average rate, and it's affecting the run game because of it. So get Brian Robinson off of your team. Go find, I don't know, go find any competent replacement, because Brian Robinson is not going to help you win your weeks, win your leagues. And if anything, he's giving you a bigger chance of losing your matchups every week.
Yep. I could not agree more. This guy over the last 4 games, he's averaging 27 rush yards per game. And I said last 4, the last 3 games, Tyler, he is averaging under 20 rushing yard, or not under 20. No, wait, what is, let me see. Oh no, my fast math is failing me. Under 25 rushing yards per game. He's averaging under 3 yards per carry during that time. And you want to hear the bad thing? His next game is against Philly. Obviously, he had a decent game against Philly last time because he found the end zone. But if you want to bank on him scoring a rushing touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have given up 1 rushing touchdown on the season so far, just to Brian Robinson, that'd be my guess. I wouldn't do that. In his playoff schedule, he gets the Rams, the Jets, and in the championship game, he gets the 49ers. If you want to bank on any of those 3 games being a run-heavy game where he sees 20 carries, all the power to you, but I wouldn't. I just don't think there's any optimism for Brian Robinson moving forward. You sell him as saying, hey, he's a running back 1 somewhere. These guys are hard to find. But like you said, the snap counts, 37, 55, 36, 53, and 49 were the snap percentages that he's played since week 2. That's gross.
It's gross. Over the last 4 games, you want to take a stab at how many yards per carry he's averaging?
Oh, it's got to be like 2.9.
2.7.
Oh,
2.7. And let's just say, on a good day, he gets 14 carries. Simple math. That's 38 rushing yards. It's disgusting. At that point, you're banking on a touchdown to keep him relevant. Don't play that game. Play that game. Get him off of your team. Go find a competent piece. And I'm just looking through names and stuff. If you're able to swing Brian Robinson for James Cook. If you're able to swing Brian Robinson for David Montgomery, Brian Robinson for James Conner, Brian Robinson for Ramondre Stevenson. And yes, I know I said I was out on Ramondre Stevenson, but now I'm back in. Do it. And do it quick, because the more that people realize that Brian Robinson has been absolute poo-poo lately, the less your chances are of actually getting rid of him.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. The next guy I know is going to hurt, Ty. I know you don't want to hear it.
This is more Lucas, but
and Lucas as well. But I know it's both of you compared to me, at least. I'm okay saying this one, but it's Christian Watson. And I know probably a big part of it has to do with the injury, right? I mean, he missed a large part of the training camp. He missed the beginning of the season with a hamstring injury, but he still has had 0 top 25 finishes, and he's been underwhelmingly inconsistent. In his second game back, what was that? 3 weeks, week 5, he had a 77-yard catch. Obviously when you play Christian Watson, that's something that you can almost bank on as either a big player or a touchdown. But the dude is 50th in target share. On a team with Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, Aaron Jones being banged up, like you would expect Christian Watson to kind of take that jump and start commanding a target share closer to that 25%. And we just haven't seen it yet. So the question becomes, is it the injury? Is it the offense? The fact there's no Aaron Rodgers this year? Is it talent, lack of talent? Is it all three? Is it a mix of two of them? I don't know if I have the answer. For me, I wouldn't be trying to acquire Christian Watson at this point. I just think, this Green Bay offense hasn't looked great. Jordan Love's put up decent fantasy points, but the offense hasn't looked great. Even against Denver this last week, right? Denver is the team that you beat up on. Denver is the team that's selling everybody, that's giving up on the year. And yet they couldn't quite figure it out. Tyler, do you have optimism for Christian Watson moving forward, or is it kind of a, just kind of hope and pray that he figures it out?
I'm kind of torn when it comes to Christian Watson. You look at his schedule the rest of the year: Minnesota, Rams, Steelers, Chargers, Lions, Chiefs, Giants, Tampa, Carolina, Minnesota, Chicago. So good schedule until the games matter when you get to playoffs, because then it goes Giants, Tampa, Carolina, right? And then, if he gets championship week, then it's Minnesota. But by that time, you may not have a shot in that game, because Christian Watson has got tough matchups on the way. So maybe I'll say it this way. Christian Watson needs to be funneled targets, and no duh, that's what any wide receiver needs to be relevant in fantasy football, or at least have a majority of the targets. But I'm sorry, when we're giving guys like Emmanuel Wilson, we're giving guys like Dontavion Wicks, we're giving guys like Samori Toure, we're giving guys like Ben Sims, we're giving guys like that opportunities, playing time on the field. I'm sorry, I kind of want to just say, what do you freaking expect your team to produce? I think the thing with Watson, I think it's more of an indictment on the offense than it is on Christian Watson, because the dude has raw talent. He has untapped potential. We saw it with Rodgers. I don't know if Jordan Love is the guy that's going to necessarily help bring it out. But then again, we're giving guys why are we trying to spread the ball around? Why not just get the ball into the hands of your playmakers? That's the confusing thing for me. So maybe it is part of the injury. That's why he's not getting, hyper targeted or whatever. But I think the overarching thought that I have is, it is super concerning with not only how it looks in reality, but what it's turning out to be in fantasy football. And I'm not looking at, it's 30% of me says you should go buy low on Christian Watson, but the other 70% of me is you're buying in on a bad offense.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really want to invest in a bad offense? And I don't necessarily want to, I guess.
Yeah, I think the question is, if you're buying in on Christian Watson, first of all, do you think he can be in the alpha in this offense, right? Do you think he can emerge as the wide receiver 1 this season moving forward? Because if he's not, you're going to have very inconsistent games, like you said, on a bad offense. Because right now he's on a 17-game pace. Obviously, he's only played 3 games, so take this with a grain of salt. But it's for 45 receptions on 90 targets for 810 yards and 4 touchdowns. Right, you're not excited about that. That doesn't get you pumped up. You don't want that on your team. It feels like a Gabe Davis is kind of where Christian Watson feels like he's falling right now on a worse offense. But if you think that Christian Watson can take that step forward, that's a different story, right? If you think that, hey, he can start commanding a 25% target share, then obviously, he could be in for some, great games coming forward. And he's got the schedule: Minnesota, the Rams, Pittsburgh, and Chargers over his next 4 to take that step. It's just, do you believe that he can? That's kind of where you were trading. And, if you've been following us for a while and you heard me talk about him this offseason, you know that I don't believe that he's going to take that jump. But yeah, I think that's kind of where you have to fall on Christian Watson. The next guy, though, we know that he can be elite. He was drafted to be extremely elite. It's Mr. Austin Ekeler, Tyler. What is going on with Austin Ekeler?
I don't know, honestly. It's not been good from Austin Ekeler in his 2 games back from injury. He's averaging only 2.5 yards a carry, pretty much. And in week 7 versus the Chiefs, he only had 2 targets with 1 reception. His longest run since returning from his injury, 6 yards.
Oh,
6 yards. And through the 2 games, he has 16 total fantasy points. It's an average running back 28 finish. 10 running backs bested that single-handedly in week 7. Only took them 1 week, and they bested 16 points. And kind of the cherry on top, I guess, for Austin Ekeler, he's putting up his lowest elusive rating on PFF. And the elusive rating is PFF's personal rating. He's putting up a 30.1 elusive rating. That's less. That's more than less. No, how am I trying to say this? Maybe I'll say it this way. His career elusive rating, 68.5. This year alone, 30.1. Not good.
No.
So it begs the question, has he lost a step? Is he on a decline because of his age? Because he is 28 years old. And I don't think so at all. I think he's a massive buy low at the moment. And I don't care if you have to pay up. I don't care if you're paying 95 cents on the dollar for Austin Ekeler. You go buy him right now. Ekeler still on the year. He's 4th in yards created per touch. He's 7th of all running backs in target share. He's 6th in weighted opportunity. You balance out all running backs, how much they're involved, game script, all that stuff. Austin Ekeler is 6th. And he's gotten 14 carries in both his games back. So the volume is still there. In his schedule the rest of the year, phenomenal. Chicago, the Jets, Detroit, Green Bay, Baltimore, New England, Denver, Vegas, Buffalo, Denver in the championship game. He has a phenomenal phenomenal schedule the rest of the year. He's still heavily involved. It's just a matter of time until we see a very, very efficient Austin Ekeler that we saw in week 1, where he put up 7.3 yards a carry and saw 4 receptions, 5 targets. That could start this week against the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys we talked about with Jonathan Taylor. We've talked about with Breece Hall. Coming off an injury. Oh, when's he going to get back? You don't know. Like Jonathan Taylor this week, it happened against the Cleveland Browns. Well, Austin Ekeler gets one of the worst defenses in the NFL right now. So I'm not going to take a chance. If you're thinking at all about buying Austin Ekeler, you have to do it this week because he plays Chicago this next week, and he could pop off, like you said, for 27 fantasy points. He had 1 reception on 2 targets last week. That's not happening again. The Chargers cannot do that again. If they want to win games, they need him more involved in the receiving game. But like you said, 14 attempts in each of the 2 games is what am I saying? Not inspiring.
Encouraging.
Encouraging. That's the word I'm looking for. There we go. Speaking of someone who is not encouraging, and this is all Lucas's fault. The fact that we are in on this guy at all. I'm just kidding. He just brought us some good stats on this guy, and we both were like, hey, you know what? I think you might be right. And unfortunately, Sean Payton hates good players, so he doesn't use him at all. But it's Jerry Jeudy. Wide receiver 29 is his highest finish so far this year, and that was in week 5. He's had one game with more than 5 receptions. He's had no games with more than 7 targets, and he's only had one game over 70 yards. He has only seen a 21% target share, and he's only seen 73% of snaps. What is going on with Jerry Jeudy? Why is Cortland Sutton still outperforming him? Why doesn't Russ look his way in the red zone? Why doesn't Russ look his way between the 20s? It's something that's head scratching. And this is a bad offense. Let's just be honest. Like, we talk about the Packers not being a great offense. This Broncos team is a much worse offense. They're not turning it around at this point, right? They've started selling players, and they have said everyone is for sale, pretty much. We will listen to offers on everybody except for Russ, because nobody's sending offers on Russ. Does Jerry Jeudy have any hope the rest of this season, Ty, unless he's traded? Is there any hope for Jerry Jeudy the rest of the season, or is it pretty bleak?
He's got to be traded. He just absolutely has to be traded. I mean, look, on the years, he's 55th in yards per route run. He is somehow 18th in target separation. So that leads me to believe that he's getting open, but Russ is just not looking his way, which is not good at all. He's 64th in fantasy points per route. Like, it's not good with Jeudy. And I guess the question really is, I don't know if you're going to be able to trade him at all. So are you, like, is he droppable at this point?
I don't think I'd drop him, honestly.
Because if he gets traded, and let's say he gets traded to Kansas City, or Carolina, I don't even know if Carolina would be good, honestly.
Yeah.
His only saving grace, I guess, is Kansas City. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to trade in division if they can avoid it.
No.
Yeah, the thing on Jerry Jeudy is I do believe that Jerry Jeudy is a talented wide receiver. I do believe that maybe they start to figure it out a little bit more. I don't think, I don't know. It's not pretty, but at the same time, I don't think he's quite droppable. I wouldn't get rid of him. In fact, I mean, depending, if you have people in your league who are ready to drop him, he might be a guy I trade for just to sit at the end of my bench. You know, I'm not giving up like Drake London for Jerry Jeudy or something like that. I'm giving up a guy that you're close to ready, like Jahan Dotson right now, like something like that, right? I'm telling you to buy extremely low. But here's the question I really wanted to ask you. Rest of the season, Christian Watson or Jerry Jeudy?
Oh, gosh. Can I say neither?
I figured you would.
I guess I would say Christian Watson, just because I am still more in on the potential of Christian Watson than I am of Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think I lean Jeudy, but Christian Watson's probably the right answer. Our last guy, he's I think he might have been part of one of the biggest overreactions by the fantasy community as a whole after just 1 week of football. Is Calvin Ridley. And Tyler, what are our thoughts on Calvin Ridley right now?
You can pretty much drop Calvin Ridley, I guess, if you're not going to drop Christian Watson or Jerry Jeudy. You'll have to drop Calvin Ridley. I'm kidding. Don't do that.
Don't do it. It was a joke.
That's a joke. Don't take that as gospel, because it was not.
Clip it.
Clip it. That'll make the rounds on Twitter later. Look, it's like Cam said, there was a massive overreaction week 1 with Calvin Ridley. Since then, he's only had one game inside the top 30, and his highest finish in all those other games, 31. But
Not pretty.
His other finishes, 81 wide receiver, 81, 66, 56, and 83. He has multiple games with less than 4 receptions, but he does have multiple games with more than 7 targets. So there's bleak optimism, I'll call it, with Calvin Ridley, just because of target share numbers, stuff like that. But the thing that's concerning for Calvin Ridley, he's only gone over 40 yards twice. And in weeks 1 and 5, in his 2 good weeks, he's put up 15 receptions, 19 targets, 223 yards, and a touchdown. Good for 44.7 combined points. That's 22.3 points per game. That's simple maths. All the other weeks, though, 12 receptions, 29 targets, 145 yards, a touchdown. 32.1 total points, 6.4 points per game. You can't trust Calvin Ridley at this point. There's no good way to predict when he's going to have a good game or a bad game. Now, I think his saving grace is that they have Pittsburgh this week, then they have a bye.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe during the bye week, they figure something out where they realize, wow, Jamal Agnew and Tim Jones, why are we putting them in the game? Why are they getting more target? Why are they being, targeted more by Trevor Lawrence than Calvin Ridley? But it's very, very bleak with Calvin Ridley. I don't think you can start Calvin Ridley next 2 weeks, even with this matchup against Pittsburgh. I just don't, because should Zay Jones come back, that just adds another layer of complexity to this offense. It
That's
sucks.
a really good point.
But Christian Kirk and Zay Jones are really the wide receivers that are going to stick, at least for the next game. Again, we'll see if Zay Jones actually plays. But again, between Christian Watson, Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, obviously you're going to take Calvin Ridley above the other two because it's a better offense and there's potential for bounce back with Calvin Ridley. But at the moment, it is very, very bleak.
Yeah, I mean, average or 8.1 points over his last 2 games combined with no Zay Jones. That's the big thing. Zay Jones has been out. He's still not exactly crushing it. Like you said, I think you got to really look at your roster this next week. And I mean, unless you're staring down, a whole bunch of nothing, unless Jahan Dotson right now is your only other option, right? I might be looking to take Calvin Ridley out of your lineup. But yeah, it is. Everyone got excited and said Christian Kirk is non-existent in this offense after week 1. Calvin Ridley is the guy. But we were preaching it all offseason. It is going to be extremely difficult to take 2 years off of football and come back and be productive week in and week out. And like you said, hopefully on the bye he can rest. Hopefully on the bye he can kind of get, back into this offense. But just not exactly pretty. He's seen a 41% catch rate on his 2 big games. That's disgusting. I mean, that is just gross.
I mean, here's a quick name game for you, right? Just while we're thinking of players. I mean, the guy that we mentioned earlier, Josh Downs or Calvin Ridley.
Oh, I would trade Calvin Ridley to get Josh Downs plus back because I think you can do that right now, and I would be all over that.
Yep. Calvin Ridley or Devonta Smith. You're likely packaging Ridley up, but
yeah, man. And that one's tough because they've both been playing, not great for fantasy, but I think I'm going to lean Devonta Smith just because what we saw last year.
Calvin Ridley, Garrett Wilson.
Oh, this is a good one right now. But man, knowing Zay Jones is coming back, I'm going to go Garrett Wilson.
Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis.
I'm going to go Calvin Ridley still here.
Calvin Ridley or Chris Godwin.
Ooh, that one's tough. I'm going to go Godwin. I sneaky like Godwin still.
Yep.
So.
Couple more. Calvin Ridley or Tyler Lockett.
Ooh.
And let me just add some context for those that aren't familiar with Tyler Lockett's performance so far this year. 3, 26, 8, 9, 15, and 7.
I think I'm gonna
It is
lean.
exactly like Calvin Ridley.
I know. I think I'm gonna lean Ridley just because I think JSN's gonna really start coming into this offense. But that one's very close right now.
And the last one, DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley.
Oh, that is so gross. That is so
Gross.
disgusting. I think I would trade Calvin Ridley to get D-Hop plus.
Wow.
I think I would. I just.
It's scary.
I mean, when you add in Evan Ingram into this offense and Travis Etienne seeing 20 carries a game, it's just like, if he's not seeing the volume without Zay Jones, I just don't know if he's, really going to pop off. And the fact of the matter is, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be gross the rest of the season. I mean, it's going to be some ugly games, but he could easily be he could be 13 targets, 6 catches, 60 yards, and then maybe a touchdown every 3 games. That could be his stat line every week.
Yeah.
But man, yeah, it's looking bleak for Calvin Ridley, that's for sure.
I saw a tweet. I think it was on Sunday. I don't remember where it was from, but it's the Interstellar meme of when Matthew McConaughey is like watching his like past self do something.
Yep.
And it's like me trying to tell myself to not buy in on Calvin Ridley, like training camp clips. And I was like, yeah.
Remember when they were comparing him and Zay Jones, and he looks so much faster.
He looks so much better.
And I'll admit, I bought in a little. Every year we say we're not going to buy in, and then you get someone like Calvin Ridley in a unique situation. You're like, but we've never seen this before, and it's like, well, yeah, we have, and it's always the same story.
But I will say, just on our end, we were in a Christian Kirk more than we were in a Calvin Ridley.
That's
just saying.
That is true. I will give us that pat on the back. All righty. Well, that wraps it up. Another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, you can find us on YouTube and TikTok at Fantasy Football Fellas, at Twitter at the FF Fellas. I am at Camlaw FFF on Twitter and TikTok. Tyler is at Tyler_Plath on the Twitter and on Instagram at the FF Fellas. Also, don't forget, if you do want to tail us on Underdog Fantasy, use the promo code Fellas when you do. And yeah, I think that wraps up everything I got to promo at the end and throw right at you. It's a mouthful. I'm really glad Lucas does it most weeks. Tyler, real quick before we go, any words for the people?
Say a prayer for your boys who are big Vikings fans. We may be hurting tomorrow when you're hearing this because of what happened on Monday Night Football. So
send us a nice comment.
Yeah, please.
Either
we need the encouragement.
You can either celebrate with us or you can make sure we're still not on the ledge. Alrighty. That is it for the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. We will see you later this week. Deuces.